So the title of my short talk is Tail Dogging, Sharing Experiences. And yesterday we already started to share experiences in our discussions on the topic of tail biting and tail docking, and even in the questionnaire. And the first part of my hopefully short talk, I will address very shortly the results of this discussion. So in the questionnaire, we asked for whether in your member state, in your country, you included a mandatory cycle, and yes, in most of the countries so far I received the answers. Mandatory cycle is implemented. In half of the countries who responded yesterday, the damage by ear biting is also registered somewhere, and in at least one member states there are also regulations regarding the pain relief when tail docking is performed. The threshold of tail biting before it is mandatory to stop tail docking is implemented in 4 of 7 countries who answered, and the thresholds are in 3 countries 2% and in 1 country 3%. So after this threshold of tail lesions, if the value in the respective farm is lower than this threshold, the farmers should start with not tail docking the tails of their pigs. And I will address this later on again. There are in 1 member state there are requirements for the docking methods, including cautery methods. We already addressed this when Hans introduced the EFSA study. And the maximum length that may be docked is regulated in 2 member states. It's either in 1 member state 1/3 can be docked, so 2/3 should be left, and you should not use the midst 1/3 of the tail. And in the other member state, it's half of the tail may be docked. So measures to enforce ban on docking is given in 6 of 7 member states who answered implementation. For instance, some measures are implemented in the legislation, or at least the legislation is in preparation for that. There is in 1 member state a database for monitoring of tail biting and to evaluate the risk assessment, and there are other measures going on in the member states. So for us it is also interesting and Hans also mentioned that in the EFSA report they focus on certain indicators which can be recorded at slaughterhouse, and in tail damage is assessed in 5 member states, and in 3 of these member states tail biting, the results of the tail lesions is also given back to the farmers to inform him and maybe to do some more measurements based on the results. So our aim is to implement the ban of tail docking, and we already discussed for several times, and also during our last meetings, tail biting and tail docking was a topic for this meeting. So we know quite well that different factors are relevant on different farms, because tail biting is a multi-factorial problem, and on each farm the reasons and the risk factors may be different. And that's a challenge for the farmers. And that's the consequence of this is that there is no one-fits-all solution. So it will not help to tell all farmers, okay, you just have to increase space per pig, or you only have to offer rooting material. That will be not enough, because on each farm it will be different. We also know that tail biting occurs in all housing systems, but the risk for tail biting differ between housing systems. So, but with increased cost or with improvements in the housing conditions, the costs for keeping the pigs will also increase. And we also know that in existing housing systems, for instance, fully slatted pens, the measurements to prevent tail biting are both difficult and very costly. So the problems you and the official inspectors are regularly faced with when they interact with farmers is, I would like to keep pigs with intact tails, but I cannot buy them, or if I will not tail dock the pigs, I cannot sell them. And another concern is, yes, rooting material does not work with my fully slatted floors, or rooting materials such as straw can be contaminated, for instance, by African swine fever, or litter increases heat stress. And I think maybe Hermann will address the latter point later on. But these are the arguments you often heard on farms. And the important challenge is how to change the attitude of farmers and vets towards tail docking. So these arguments are true in the view of the farmers, but from a scientific point of view, you can change it. But therefore, it is needed that the attitude of farmers and of the vets, of the farmers, will change. And farmers and vets need to learn carefully to observe their pigs. It's not just keep the pigs and look for water and food. You have to learn to interpret the science, the behavioral science of the pigs, in order to early detect possible arising problems with tail biting, in order to then timely intervene and to reduce the occurrence of severe problems. And that is very challenging for the farmers. In some countries, I already mentioned that it is already mandatory to start with a small number of unlocked pigs in order to learn all these management knowledge. And in some countries, you have to start if the tail lesions are below 2%, in others, if the risk assessment result in low risk, and then you have to start with some pigs, 2 pens or 8 pigs, etc. But we already discussed yesterday, this may be even lower the motivation for changes, because the farmer may think, okay, some problems with tail biting are fine for me, are beneficial for me, because then I can continue tail docking. And that's, of course, then is a problem. Okay, this is the second part of my talk. I don't know whether I have some minutes left.
No, but carry on anyway.
Yes. So this is just to present you very briefly what EURCAW is offering you, but I will do it very short. We have these knowledge sections, and the section on tail biting is, of course, based on the staff working document of the Commission. And we have, within this knowledge section, we have scientific background on tail biting, on the different factors contributing to tail biting, on the legal background. We also offer tools for inspections, thematic fact sheets, but also indicator fact sheets, which can be used by inspectors in order to assess tail biting. And we also included inspiring examples. And these are examples, I think, from Germany. And on the left side, you see an example from an alternative housings with a lot of straw and very different structures within the barn. But on the right side, you also see an example from a farmer in a conventional housing with fully slatted floors. And he also managed it to keep his pigs with intact tails. And I think these inspiring examples are good also for the communication between inspectors and farmers, in order to show them, okay, it's hard, it's a challenging work, but it can work. And that's the reason we included these inspiring examples. And yesterday you already heard that at the moment we do not train ourselves, but we develop training guides in order to inform what may be addressed during training courses on the different topics. To the end, I will just mention the situation in Germany. We have a federal program on animal husbandry. The ministry spent for, I think, 4 or 5 years, 42 million euros for this program. It's not only for tail biting, it's also for other welfare aspects. And the main aim is knowledge transfer, to bring the scientific knowledge and the practical knowledge, the experiences to the farmers and to the vets. And this so-called Focus Tierwohl is organized by Federal Chambers of Agriculture in Germany. They offer a digital knowledge platform. They organize seminars, workshops online or physically. They hire animal welfare multipliers who visit different farms, who visit meetings of farmers, etc., and telling about the results of this project. And they also organize and finance so-called demonstrator farms. And these demonstrator farms for pigs are spread over Germany. And this is a network of so-called pioneers. These are farmers which really do improvement of pig welfare on their farms. They do not tail dog their pigs. And I think this is a very good way to communicate if the farmers communicate with other farmers. The farmer often will not trust the scientists because we are scientists. The farmers will not trust CAs or official inspectors because they have another role. We heard about that yesterday, but they will trust other farmers. And that's, I think, a very positive topic within these networks in order to exchange experience and knowledges. There are also other activities like this webpage where the farmers can download all the relevant documents. They can download an app for performing risk assessment guidelines, etc. And finally, I will just touch the so-called Ringelschwanzprämie in Niedersachsen. It's an initiative in Lower Saxony. You can call it or translate it curly tail bonus. And if a farmer is able to keep at least more than 70% of pigs with intact tails in fattening pigs, he will earn 16.50 euro per pig. And for a weaner, if he achieves more than 80% of intact tails after weaning period, he will earn 5 euro per weaner. And this is a quite interesting incentive for the farmers. But before he can start to take part in this program, he has to improve certain aspects, or not certain aspects, he has to improve aspects in his housing conditions. But there are no strict rules. There are not the rule you have to increase space, you have to increase the access to rooting material, etc. But there is a list, and each farmer can choose within this list different requirements which fit to his farm and which fit to his individual circumstances. For instance, and at the end, he has to collect at least 10 points. Just to give you 3 examples, he will get 2 points if he offers more than 1 square meter per pig. 3 points he will earn if he gives access to outdoor to the pigs, and 1 point if the fiber content of the food is more than 5%. So the farmer himself can select what is most appropriate on his farm. Okay, that's it. Thank you.